Call to order. Everyone stand for the pledge of allegiance. Stacy, I'd like you to lead.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How do you normally do roll call, Janice? Do you?
Usually they
This
have
conference will now be recorded.
usually they have me do it.
Okay. Roll call?
Your son's on this?
Committee member Norris?
Hey Steve, can you pull the mic
Pardon?
down?
Committee member Norris, can you say here?
Here.
Vice Chairman Vicari?
Present.
Committee member Lisa Vicari? And Chairman Frederick.
Here.
Thank you.
Approval of the agenda. Can somebody make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moving on to approval of minutes for July 9th, 2020. Somebody can make a motion to approve the minutes? Make a motion to approve.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And presentations and announcements. Does anyone have any presentations or announcements?
Oh, well, I think I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a friend that she knows everybody in town, and she called someone from the CAL FIRE for me. And there's a Steve Younger. Do you know him, Steve Younger? Well, apparently the city has to call him, and he will call the Grove, which is in Pacific Grove. That's where the youth Seaway boys are, and they will do the creek. They do Pacific Grove, and he said they would do it, but we have to call them and set up a date. They like to do it in November, and they won't clear it. They'll clean it and pile it, and then we have to find somebody to clear it. But I guess Pacific Grove doesn't clear theirs, and that's what happens with us here, because we get all their junk.
Yes, unfortunately, Steve Younger passed away on Tuesday.
Oh,
Yes, he'd been sick for a little while. But,
my. Well, I guess that you find somebody that's taken his place?
Yeah.
Because it was supposedly had to come from him.
right, yeah, no, he's been retired now for
Oh.
about 8 years. But we do have a public works superintendent. And we did used to get the creek cleaned through the Pine Grove camp every year, but I believe Alan's gonna come and speak about getting the creek cleaned and what our options are right now.
Okay, well, I thought
He should be
I'd
here any minute.
throw this out for you, and
Thanks.
at least we have something to go by.
Yeah,
So if, I know you had a report, and we might wait till item I, which is the committee member report, to give an update there. Any other presentations or announcements? Hearing none, I'll move on. Public comment? I'd like to remind you, you have 4 minutes, and I'm...
Yeah, I know, I'm not talking. I happen to read in the Santa Clara is trying to get a tax to take care of the creek, Coyote Creek, which you know flood, there's like 3 creeks. And they're trying to get it passed because I guess the city found out they were responsible for it. and they also includes the sediment out of the creek in the article. So I just thought I'd let you know about it. I just heard about it. It's on the website.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, moving on. Since our first regular agenda item is Mr. Gregory, and he's not quite here yet, I think I'd like to move item 3 up to where we can discuss maybe the parcel maps, the property owners. See, we have a handout. Maybe Janice, could you give us a little report on what you found, or maybe a background of what you know about these parcel maps?
Yes, unfortunately, I started it today, but I think I went through and made copies of all the parcels that backed up to the creek. And unfortunately, I didn't get them all because
I have one.
quite a few on Edge Brook that back up to the creek. So, I've been working on that, but it shows that there's not very many parcels that actually own into the creek. So there's a few of them.
There's something you might want to think about, where do you want to start with the creek? Because through history, it's always been that dairy hole down.
Mm-hmm.
Because you really can't, you can kind of clean up the lumberds, but it's solid rock. So it's always been kind of the dairy hole past the grocery store down by Violet.
Mm-hmm.
So going from there, what I see is my parents own the dairy hole or part of it. Then it goes all to the city owns all of it. Then it goes to Phillips, which is the building right across here. It has a little tiny chunk. And then you see where it says Preston Avenue, that's the bridge. So then it continues down, and you can see that the little Greek restaurant there has like half the creek, I guess. And
Yeah.
then,
Parcel 144,
yes, yep, and then the.
or
city-
parcel 1 on, yeah.
Right, then you get the parking lot, which is the city, then Finch owns a little bit. And I think is where it got drastic was down, let's see, that looks like all the city, right down by, what one's this one? This is
Poppy Lane.
Edge Brook.
Well, this is the subdivision before it. That
Okay.
was subdivision.
Poppy.
Poppy Lane.
Poppy Lane.
Yeah, okay, so right there, that's when it started, where people actually owned a lot of the creek. It was in that little section. And then you're getting down by, is this the trailer park? No. That trailer park?
So I'm looking here, if we were to get our bearings, if you look at, it's kind of mixed in, 4-10 and 4-09 together, one is the north of the creek and one is the south of the creek. And what I see here is not many people on the north side of the creek own into the creek. Seen that right? And you have Mr. Rhodes owns quite a bit of the creek, it looks like, parcel 129.
I think that's the biggest
You own the creek?
landowner.
Let's get the room and cross it. You do.
And then you have Phillips, which is, I think, no, that's,
Yeah, which is a building right here.
yeah. So I guess the big question is, who owns this vacant area?
City of Ione. You can look at their parcel, it says 00000.
I've done that.
The assessors, and they say that it's whatever city it's in, when it says 000. That's what they told me anyhow, that you can go call them up. Because this map don't show the 000, it's the maps that I think you saw.
Yeah, I've seen,
I have that 000 in the creek.
well, I did a little research just on the assessor's map online, and you could go to the City of Ione parcels as a separate book, and you can see that all this is labeled 000.
Yeah. Because I think these are the City of Ione's maps, right?
Yes.
And the
Well, they
counties
actually
are
come from the
updated.
county.
Right, but I think the counties are actually more updated than these. I think these are
That could
kind
be.
of, couple years out of whack.
Well, just taking this section from basically the Dairy Hole or Rhodes property down to the bridge, my big question is, who's responsible for the vacant area?
I think the city.
kind of leaning that way too.
It's part of taking care of your town. I mean, if that thing floods, someone's gonna get liable for it. I can guarantee you, if the city's not trying.
So, and then, of course, who maintains the levees? Or who's responsible? Is a landowner responsible for, you know, if there was a flood and it went through on their property? Are they ultimately responsible?
And I think the only levy, to tell you the truth, is right here, the park.
Well, and down
Down there by
in
the-
And down this side, on the other side,
Down, yeah,
store.
Yeah.
under the levee trail there. Yeah.
And I believe the Army Corps, it's even the Army Corps,
Early 60s.
Army Corps built, I think when the Army Corps builds
You're
something,
gonna talk to
they
them.
need to first answer questions, part of the government.
So we need to get a hold of them and have them come and inspect it, see if it's okay, and maybe we
What they used to do, they just push the gravel at the bottom and you pushed it up the levees. That's how you maintain it. Which hasn't been done in, I don't know, 20 years.
That'll be the next person I get a hold of.
Well, I'm kind of leaning towards, I'd really like some professional, I don't know who that would be, maybe the assessor's office, to tell me what 000 means on a parcel map.
You can find that out.
Before we get excited on who's responsible for their section of the property, who's responsible for the 000?
Which page is that on?
It's not labeled on here, but it's map 4-10 and 4-9, which I'm looking at specifically.
And to me, the other cities like Jackson, Sutter Creek, when they do clean their creeks, they don't care if it's their land or whoever's land it is. They clean the whole thing. Just as a courtesy, you know? You don't fix one section of a creek and then skip it and clean another.
Yeah.
And it defeats the purpose.
Well, not to push this along, but does anybody have any more questions or want to look at these maps in more detail? Take them home, do some research? Well, that being said, maybe we'll go back to agenda item number 1. Mr. Alan Gregory from the Department of Fish and Game is here.
You want me to come up there?
Sure.
Or stand at the table.
Yeah, you can stand at the podium, and then you can be recorded.
Holy.
You're getting me on camera.
So, Alan,
Yes, sir.
I'm Steve Frederick, and
Nice to
this is
meet
the
you.
rest of the Creek Committee. We've had one meeting, and this is our second meeting. And last meeting, we decided that we needed to get a professional in here to tell us what we can and can't do with the
Sure.
creek. And we knew that you were a local fish and game officer, and I think you and I, from my other place of business, have talked about some things.
I believe so.
And maybe what I would like to do is get your perspective on, I'm going to speak for all of us, but we're concerned about the shape the creek is in.
Sure.
And it kind of goes back, in my perspective, to 2017 when the creek almost flooded. And there was less vegetation in the creek during that storm event. Now I just drove across the bridge this evening, you can't even see the bottom of the creek.
Beautiful over there.
And, we as citizens feel that something needs to be done with the creek to protect. We're not in the business of, harming fish or wildlife, but I think something needs to be done. So
Sure.
maybe if you could give us a little, your 2 cents on what should be done, what can be done with the creek, and what we can do in our position now as the Creek Committee to help that effort.
Right. So any waterways in the state, whether they fall on public land or private land, are managed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And any work done in those waterways to either the bed, the bank, or the channel of the creek is any maintenance to that, any work done that there is a permit that's required. We call it a 1600 permit, and that's the Fish and Game Code section that manages or basically covers any kind of work done in a creek. So what you're saying is, based on the vegetation, and I'm no hydrologist. I'd be the last person to be able to answer how vegetation affects the water flow The willows, I mean, willows are on every creek in the state just about. They're the fastest growing species we have. I mean, that could blow out, and as long as the root balls are there, they're gonna be up there the next year. What our department's concerned with is habitat, both for terrestrial stuff and aquatic stuff. So those riparian trees like cottonwoods, willows, things like that provide not only cover for, say, birds to nest in, they also shade pools of water for aquatic species to survive in. So that's one of the main reasons why we regulate the riparian habitat along with the dirt and the rock that's in the creek. Now, what can be done is the city can, if they want to maintain that creek, can apply for a 1600 permit, or what's called a stream bed alteration permit. That's the other name that it goes by. And it's not a hard process. It just needs to be put in a format that says, hey, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. This is when we're going to do it, because that's an important thing about, in some creeks it's more important than others, depending on time of year, if there's fish coming up to spawn, things like that. Or say, frogs laying their eggs. Because we are probably in some zone of potential threatened and endangered species that the state would be concerned with potentially living in the creek bottom. I don't know if they're actually there. The department goes off of suitable habitat, what's called the Suitable Habitat Index, and I imagine there's some probably endangered species that could reside in this creek, whether it's here or not. That's left up to be decided. So, but the process is relatively simple, depending on how extensive the work, obviously. If it's just brush clearing to allow for water to flow better down and out the creek, I don't think that would be, our biologists are the ones that review and then approve those permits. So, but if it comes down to digging out the creek channel or things like that, that's probably going to be a different story. But like I said, if it's just something as simple as vegetation management, it's probably going to be pretty straightforward as long as it's done during the right time of year. So it doesn't affect any kind of nesting habitat or cover habitat. And again, the biologists are the ones that make that determination.
I have a question.
Yes.
About the bridge. I guess Lisa's been talking to the Caltrans person. How does that, have you come up with anything like that in your experience? Do they take care of a certain part of that? Because the bridge looks like not very, it's a blight, I think, on the community, as is the creek right now, all overgrown. But do you ever work with them, or do they have any acts, are they responsible for parts of the creek?
Yeah, so if Caltrans is doing any kind of bridge work that is going to directly affect the creek, they are required to work with us, and our biologists work very closely with Caltrans biologists to make sure the erosion control and all that other stuff is squared away and approved by our department. So yes.
Okay.
For us, when enforcement gets involved, it's generally, and probably 99% of the time, it's a neighbor complaining about the other neighbor, saying, oh, my neighbor's got a tractor in the creek, and that's when we show up. Work that has a permit applied for to be done, those usually go pretty smooth. And our biologist might go out and say like, yeah, everything looks good, all right, put more, erosion fencing up or something like that. But for the most part, once it gets approved from our biologist, it goes pretty smooth. And Caltrans, like I said, Caltrans and our biologists work very well together.
Okay. So we should try to get them involved as well then?
Yeah, if the work is going to require any kind of work to that bed banker channel,
Well,
then yes.
we'd like them to at least repaint. I mean, it's rusted, the bridge, there's paint chips, falling in the creek, kids pick them off,
Sure.
they go by, it really looks terrible. We have a group of volunteers that would happily paint it. We've already had paint that would be donated and everything, but we just can't go do that, we found out.
Right, yeah, you got to get the buyout from them to do it, sure. And for us, that wouldn't be, my experience with paint painting issues, and if you see it, if anybody's gone over like the Rio Vista Bridge in the last 2 years, they've been doing a lot of paint work on that bridge. And we're to the point where they basically wrap it in plastic, sandblast it off, and they have a ventilation system sucking all those paint chips off, so nothing's going back into the waterway. But if it's just a matter of, rolling a new coat of paint on it to make it look good, it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
But that would be up to Caltrans.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I wouldn't think it's that big of a deal.
They might need to do that, it's pretty bad.
Sure.
But I'm not sure, but, no, that's great, so.
So, I think, at least Stacy and I, we've been around the Ione area for many, many years, and we are aware that the creek used to be cleaned.
Sure.
And it was cleaned even with a bulldozer back then. And back then, I think they had an ongoing stream alteration agreement from what I was told historically.
Yeah, didn't they have like a 5-year continuous one? Like it kept running and then finally someone gave it up?
I talked to Jackson, Dawn,
Yeah, Bree,
talked to Bree Wilder, he's the parks manager, and you want to tell him what you found out?
don't you?
You were going to talk about it. So
No, that they've used the Pine Grove Youth Camp.
And it's a 5-year
I don't know if
plan.
it's CYA anymore, but, yeah, and they'd clean all along Highway 49 by Denny's. I guess that's a little creek or whatever, but all the cattails and stuff, they clear that out. Needs it now.
Caltrans is in charge of along Denny's.
Yeah,
And
it's responsible for
and then the
that.
city takes care of the rest. And found out a little bit of information. It costs $200 and something a day, and it goes for a few months. And that may be an issue of why this hasn't been taken care of. So that's through Pine Grove Youth.
Yeah, I knew there was a fee.
Yeah.
Originally, Mule Creek, part of their permit, they were not allowed to build that prison. That was part of the deal, that they cleaned the creek and the parks, and they did that for years.
Right.
And then it went away, and no one ever.
Community crew.
And when I went and talked to the prison, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, about when I got on council, I asked them why they don't do it, and they said, no one's asked. So that's another thing, to get them involved. Because even the inmates say that it's a disgrace that they go to Jackson and clean that creek, and they don't get to come clean it.
And our daughter works with Angelo, and
Oh,
she's can set us up with an appointment with him as soon as we want to go that direction.
So the comments that Mr. Gregory made here, it seems like if we get a stream alteration agreement, maybe focus on, well, since we're new at this, maybe the brush clearing aspect of the creek, not going towards the banks or disturbing the bed. It might be a pretty simple thing.
I think so. I really do. If it's just vegetation maintenance to facilitate flow through the city, I really don't see that being a huge issue. I can't imagine they're gonna say, because I know down kind of where I live, there's my kids go down the creek and they're playing and digging frogs and all kinds of stuff, and there's those cottonwoods that are right there on the bank. Those are gonna be like a no-go. They're gonna say no, because the root balls, actually support the banks of those creeks. So something like that would probably not be approved, but if it's just willow maintenance and maybe cleaning debris that is built up that might cause some kind of log jam or something, I don't see why that would be a huge issue. And this isn't an anadromous waterway, so there's no salmon coming up this thing. Yeah, there's fish in there. There's fish from the ponds that when we have these heavy rains, they overflow. There's a few bass in there, I don't know. I haven't been able to figure out what kind of there's some sort of native minnow, a hitch or something that's down there. There's some sunfish, but I haven't seen anything particular that would be, fish-wise, would be endangered.
I guess this is a question to Stacy, since he's our council member rep. Like, what kind of budget do we have?
Well, let the town flood and we'll get millions.
No, why I'm asking this is because we could go into this blind. I could go pull up a stream alteration agreement and start filling it out, invite the prison crew over here, and next thing you know, we're cutting down cottonwoods that we're not supposed to. It almost seems to me we might need an environmental consultant or a biologist to help us with that application, help us communicate with the Fish and Game so they're comfortable in what we're doing, and that could cost several $1,000s. I don't think, if we took a section of the creek and focused on it kind of as our trial as a committee, which I'm proposing the bridge up, because that's what I always see. And it seems that maybe the city has more of a jurisdiction in that area than downstream where people are starting to own into the middle of the creek. And take that as our,
I don't think the clearing of the vegetation will be that. If the worst comes to worst, like if Caltrans, which we have to work with Caltrans on it, I can't remember what, but you're right, that $200 a day, and that's for them, and I bet we can get them to waive it. The big expense will be, because you probably all know, that creek is at least 8 foot deep in gravel. It's 8 foot too high on the bottom. 8 feet needs to get taken out and pushed out.
That's what I was gonna ask Alan about that.
And the actual physical work of that, there's tons of companies that want to donate that are local, that want to help.
Right.
So the physical part of it is probably taken care of. That's going to be the hard part.
well, I'm just thinking of getting my foot in the water.
Right, just clean
Like,
brush.
Clean brush.
Yes.
Okay, now we have a communication with the fishing game, or fish and wildlife, excuse me.
It's okay. I worked for them before they were fishing wildlife, so.
But yeah, good idea. I
So the
agree.
first 1,600, we should just do to clear the brush and-
Yeah,
and clean it up.
And start that line of communication with the biologist and say, hey, what are our procedures for doing this? And if we want to go dig out gravel to make that creek bottom deeper, then yeah, that's definitely going to take a little bit more, because then you start getting into erosion issues and siltation issues, and again, that's, I mean, I can recognize a violation, but to tell you the biological significance of it, that's why we pay biologists big money. But yeah, I think just starting that line of communication and then getting that, if they allow, I haven't heard of a maintenance permit, but I'm not saying, that doesn't mean that we don't do it, an annual maintenance thing, where it has some stipulations of, yeah, you can do this during this time of year, up to cut trees up to this diameter to facilitate flow. I'm sure something like that can be done. I mean, these cities all over the state maintain waterways, especially that are prone to flooding and some sort of issues. And in Sacramento, there's all kinds of creeks that are constantly flooding during heavy rain events, and I don't know if those communities there have ever really proposed it. But I think a lot of those is because they are potential salmon habitat. They flow into the American River, and potentially salmon could come up them. So they're a little more concerned with that type of waterway. I mean, here, where does this ultimately flow into?
Dry Creek.
Dry
Into
Creek.
Dry Creek, which flows into McCollum.
Yep, and Thornton.
I mean, potentially, but I guess it could be considered an adjunct.
I've never seen a salmon growing up here and swimming and.
It would have to be at the right, we'd have to
Yeah.
get heavy rain at the right time of year when there's a salmon run coming up the McCollum, which is starting to come in right now. And obviously, we don't have
Yeah.
a drop of water in here.
Yeah.
Right now, the creek's completely dry, so, completely dry.
So Alan, I guess I'm gonna ask your opinion, do you think if we really got on this stream alteration agreement, we could get something done by the end of the year before it rains?
I think if you got the biologist on board and you're not shooting for the moon, I think you probably could, yeah. The only, I mean, your hangup is like, I'm gonna use the excuse that a lot of other people are using right now. COVID. I mean, it's just our biologists they're not going to the offices right now, or very rarely, and the processing time is probably what's gonna hang it up more than anything.
So we can go online and find the permit, that's how we would do it? There's no one we should talk to, you can't give like a.
I can find out, since this isn't Amador County isn't my area of responsibility.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I supervise SAC, Yolo, and Solano County wardens, so it's all out of the Rancho Cordova office. So I can easily find out who the biologist is that would.
Well, maybe that would be the first step, is contact the Fish and Wildlife biologist and get maybe some advice on which way we should go. But I'm kind of leaning towards that we need a little more horsepower and
Yes.
maybe an environmental consultant. I'm not sure of one,
I'm not
but
gonna find out right now.
as a consultant or the biologist?
The biologist.
And then too, I had a question about the levees.
Yes.
Itself, I guess, Mrs. T there, what was it, back in the 60s, or how many
Yeah,
years?
I actually talked to Mark Gephardt, who talked to his dad, and he
He would
said
tell
that
us.
it was early 60s. So, but, and I talked to Kenny Mackey, but I wasn't able to find anything like in the files, but I'm
We just
sure-
wonder who's responsible. Obviously, they made the levee at one point.
Sure.
Who's responsible for them? I mean, does anyone come out and check them? I know we're not like along the Sacramento River.
Yeah, when you start talking those,
Yeah.
that's Army Corps of Engineers or Bureau of Reclamation. I couldn't tell you who would be responsible for these.
Okay. I mean, they're there, they've been, since I've been around.
It wouldn't surprise me if Army Corps has some.
I would kind of lean in that direction myself.
Yeah.
We just wonder for, for a landowner if they're responsible, because they do own out into the creek, I guess. And I guess brings me to another question for you. Glad you're here. Is it, how, can that landowner, what rules are that does he have to, or she abide by? The same thing, they can't go clear the creek if they're,
Yeah, basically.
they can.
They cannot.
They
Yeah,
can't.
they're not technically. So like down where I live in Castle Oaks, those parcels go down into the creek, the ones that live along the creek. And we've gotten calls and complaints of people, digging primarily on the levees. There's some folks down there that
Gold
like to
mine.
gold mine down there on the levees. And essentially, it's in the law enforcement perspective, none of it's fenced or posted, right? So if they have legal access to the creek and none of it's posted, and until a landowner says, don't come back, or the sheriff says, don't come back, or IOPD says, don't come back, nobody's gonna do anything. And really, you can't until there's a warning, an official warning saying, hey, don't come back on this property. Now, if it was fenced or posted, then it's a different story, but it's not down there. So where we can say, hey, you can't do this, is where they're digging on the levees and potentially compromising those levees by digging into them. And we can say, hey, no, you can't do this. The bed, okay, because you're not compromising the levees, but once they start getting on those banks, then it becomes more of an issue.
So they own it to the middle of the creek, if they do.
Right.
But it's really just in theory that they own it, because they can't really do anything one way or the other.
Right, yeah, they would, if they wanted to, like, let's say down in Delta where these properties go out into the waterway, even if people want to put in a dock on their own property, they've got to shove those pilings into the bank of the waterway, and they've got to get a 1600 permit through us.
Okay.
A lot of them don't,
Yeah.
but unless if we're out of patrol, we just, assume that they had one when they did it. It's until somebody complains, then it draws our attention. But here is a little different story. I know there's some people that have cut steps down the levees to get down into the creek. And yeah, they probably shouldn't be doing that. The only caveat with this law is it says the word significant is in there. It's got to be a significant alteration to the bed bank or channel.
Okay.
How significant is that?
So what if there was a property owner that had a bunch of cottonwoods and they were just tired of them there, and they hired a tree company? They didn't disturb the bank or the bed, and they just said, I want all those trees out of there. 1,600?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, is it significant? It's probably significant more on the habitat side than on the stream bed alteration side. Would they need a 1,600? Probably not. That's a better question for the biologist. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean,
So how liable then would they be if they had trees where they supposedly own out in the middle,
sure.
and there was a flood and somehow those trees got washed out and knocked the bridge out or something like that?
I don't think they're liable at all. It's
They wouldn't
an
be?
act of nature.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think they have any, those landowners have any liability or any requirement to maintain the creek.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be kind of a catch-22 for us to say, you're in trouble if you do the work, but then this agency says you're in trouble if you don't do the work.
That's good that he said that, because there's certain people in this city that tell all the landowners that they're responsible for the creek and they have to clean it, which is a totally inaccurate statement.
Exactly. And then for the record, and then they could be charged for the cleanup, or they need to pay to maintain it or whatever. That's kind of what we've heard, where some people were going in that direction, and I don't really
I don't think so.
agree with, yeah.
No. Our department would have we would be like, we're gonna walk away from that one, because we're not in the business of basically extorting people, saying, if you don't do this, you will be fined for this. Granted, we do it in some occasions, but generally with pollution stuff. If you don't clean up, we will pay for the cleanup and you will be charged. And we'll be charged civilly, and the cleanup will cost a lot more.
Well, this committee, we haven't gone down that direction, but when we got put on as a committee, they talked about the storm drains and pollution coming off of the city streets is something that we may have to look at in the future, but that's not our focus right now.
Yeah, and you see any city that has storm drains that drain to the waterways, they all have little fish posts, paintings on all drains to the creek, and the city has it too. I mean, it's more, I mean, I think our agency knows that there is just gonna be some runoff just due to life. But it's when somebody dumps their oil down a storm
Blatantly
drain,
dumps
or
it.
paint. I mean, I've seen it several times in town with painters.
What about sewage from a prison?
So I know the Amador County Warden is working on that right now, so I'm gonna leave that to her.
Did I bring that up?
Yes, sewage is.
Who is the amateur?
Her name's Caitlin
Okay.
Blagg. She's new to Amador's a year and a half.
You were for a while, right?
No, my wife was.
Oh, your wife was.
Yeah. Liz was Amador for 6 years before she promoted.
So I have one last question, and it kind of got brought up with your comment about mining. What is the status of the dredging ban? I know there was a hearing maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Are they still banning dredging?
Yeah, they're still trying to figure out how and I'm saying they're just kind of generally, but what needs to, our department it was thrust upon our department through a lawsuit to manage dredging in a different way than we were. And good, bad, or indifferent, I think that's a fair statement depending on where you were in the state. Some of these high mountain streams were above all the dams, not as important. You get down into the anadromous waters, then you're talking a little bit more important when it comes to when you do the work. Because if you have suction dredging going on when the salmon are coming up and you start smothering those egg beds, then yeah, you're gonna hurt the salmon population. Same thing on those high streams, because the trout do spawn in the rivers. So knowing when there needs to be some changes to the regulations. Before it was just, you could dredge from this date to this date. Go for it, have fun. So I think they've got to look at every single waterway and how that works for it. And then they got to come up with a new permitting system. And then there's lawsuits that, our department gets sued.
Is it going to be within our lifetime?
I hope so. I really truly hope so, because it was I was fortunate enough to work in Calaveras when suction dredging was still legal, and I enjoyed going and talking to those guys and then writing guys tickets for who weren't permitted to suction dredge. It was we have a permit system for a reason, and guys would just not go get their permits, and they'd be down in these little canyons on private property, and the landowner downstream would be like, hey, the water's running muddy. Okay, well, I'm gonna go walk the creek. And sure enough, you find a dredge. It's not, or a tractor, one of the two. Something causes the dirt during the middle of summer. It's not rain. So I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I know there's groups that are fighting for it, there's groups that are fighting against it, and it's just a matter of coming to some conclusion, some agreement to how it's gonna play out. But I hope it comes back.
That's good information for us to know.
We have, what do we have, about half a mile of creek up above Sutter Creek on property there. And we got a visit from Fish and Game back then. There's a beaver dam.
Oh, yeah.
Beavers came up and it was awesome. We swam till August that year, you know, but they came checking things out because when you cross the bridge up there out of on Sutter Creek Volcano, the property's right there. So you could see that's not normal, you know, but
Right.
yeah. Then they
Had a beaver dam on my property years ago, before the water, when it used to flow better. And beavers made a dam right down, I'm about 15 feet up. And so you have to be real quiet when you go out there if you want to, you know, because you never saw them otherwise. But yeah, they had their dam there. Neat.
What is Fish and Wildlife's position on beaver dams? If a farmer or rancher and it's causing damage,
Yeah,
can they go
depredation.
out and,
Yeah. We issue depredation permits all the time for them.
for the beaver, but to actually pull the dam out?
They can pull the dam out, yeah. Yeah, once the beaver's gone, they just take the dam out. Yeah, it's pretty easy. And a lot of the ag guys in Yolo County, we get a lot of permits issued in Yolo County for exactly that. They go in and wipe the beavers out and then either backhoe the dams out, or I'm sure some of the guys blow them up.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we don't regulate beavers too hard. It's an old managed species from the fur trapping days when there was some value to the beavers. But now it's more just, they're here, they're not going anywhere, and, you know, if they're affecting landowners, then they could get permits for them pretty easily.
So does anyone else have any more
I
questions?
just want to, my name's Lisa.
I just said,
Hi. I just want to thank you for being here. I know that it
I'm
was
sorry,
probably
I
a
was
drag
late.
to have to come out, leave your family. You've answered a lot of questions.
it was funny, but I had my phone on silent, and I had a reminder on my phone from when Janice called, and I just gotten home from taking the kids to get ice cream at the
Oh, yeah.
I know Sweets, and she called, I'm like, oh no.
Well, we really appreciate
You're
you taking
welcome,
the time.
and, you know, Janice knows how to get a hold of me, so if you guys have any more questions, I'll try and get the biologist's number, I can get that to you, Janice, and, that shouldn't take too long, and hopefully they can at least maybe give some guidance on the process. They probably won't be able to give any technical advice, but guidance on the process at least.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And hopefully you'll become our new local resource. Did you say her name was Kate?
Caitlin.
Caitlin?
Caitlin is the Amador County warden.
Does she live here locally? maybe?
Yeah, she lives in El Dorado County.
You guys are driving all over the place. What's her last name?
Blag, well, Kraft, actually.
Kraft.
They just got married, or she just officially changed her last name. Kraft, Kraft.
How long has she been here now?
About a year and a half.
Is there another game warden up country, or is she just?
There's, Bill lives
Bill,
up there. He was the Amador warden, and then
What was his last name?
Miller.
Miller, yeah.
Yeah, his dad was the principal at Jackson High.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Miller.
Well, thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. I'll stick around if you guys have.
Yeah.
Can I get up and say something?
What's that?
Yeah, any public comments?
One of the marijuana positions.
I would like to ask him, what happens if a tree starts to lean off a bank and it's an emergency? And I know where a tree fell, there's cottonwood is 4 foot through laying across the creek right now.
That's right.
That's gonna divert water.
That's going to divert a lot of water.
How can we go cut it
Yep.
when we can't cut it?
Well, there are emergency provisions under that stream bed alteration program. So if something like that happens, yes, you can go in and cut it, and then just do an after the fact permit and notifications to the department.
Because it's been laying across the creek, it's not on my property, but it laid across some of my property, and it's gonna divert water onto my bank, and it's gonna eat it.
Yeah, it definitely will.
And-
Okay, if it were me, if it's deadfall in the creek, I would tell you to go cut it out right now. If somebody from the city reported that, I'd be like, we're not responding. That's not what I would call any kind of alteration or significant alteration to the creek, because
That's the
we understand.
problem I have with the cottonwoods, you said, if they fall over, that root ball they takes the whole bank with it.
You could.
So you got a eddy there where it's gonna keep eating.
It's gonna keep eating away at the levee.
And I just don't understand that. But, the other question I got is,
Oh, the city,
like Stacy said, it's over 8 foot, I bet you in some places it's 14 feet of gravel. And you take 40 feet wide, that's a ton of water. A ton of water. And we called the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'll have to say, my wife, we finally had to send a registered letter to them to get an answer from them.
Army Corps.
Yeah, we actually had to send a registered letter before we got anybody to answer the phone. And I think that's terrible. Here's the
Yes.
government, and they told us we had to talk to you people.
Well, what you have a federal agency that has, do they truly have jurisdiction over what's going on?
Well,
Some may say
the
otherwise.
thing is, that's where the money comes from. It's not from the state. It's from the FEMA. That's federal.
Potentially, yeah.
That's what people gotta learn that you know about.
Well, I think, after talking to Officer Gregory, one of our goals is to create that line of communication with somebody at the Fish and Wildlife. So when Larry comes to us as his resource, we could say, hey, we can call Gregory and, yeah, go cut the tree out. Let's get
I'm glad you
moving.
guys are here, because before I come to the city and the city says, no, it's your jurisdiction. Well, we can't, I don't know what a 1601 permit or whatever you call it. I bet you it's probably at least $400 or $500.
Yeah, there's a fee
That's
involved.
what and how the poor person dealing land, and I can't, as he knows, I can't divert any of my property. If I do my levee work, get the permission, I can't buck it off somebody else. That's a federal law. So that's the problem, we're kind of in a dilemma, and we're paying taxes on something, on my constitution that all of you took an oath for. It says property, it don't say nothing about no wild animals, nothing, it says property. It says livelihood and property. Amendment 5.
I'm gonna bite my tongue. We've had our discussions at the gas station. I'm gonna bite my tongue.
Call to order.
It's true.
It's a little more than that. Just a little.
Well, moving down to cleaning of the creek, I think we can, I'd like to summarize kind of some of my thoughts on, again, what I just said is, I think we could focus on maybe, as this committee on a certain section, so we could, show some progress, and maybe that would be the bridge up to the dairy hole. That's what they used to focus on. I think we should reach out to this biologist at the Fish and Wildlife Service. Maybe do a little bit of research on some local environmental consultants. That wouldn't cost us too much, so we could bring back to the city council with some maybe proposals for consulting work. Just from the world I come from, you're probably looking at a couple $1,000s for consulting. I think maybe having them maybe even do the stream alteration agreement would be probably something very beneficial, because they talk the same talk. And maybe that's what we should do, is make one of our goals by the next meeting to see what it takes to get a stream alteration agreement going.
And I'll talk to the financial director and see, I bet we've got a fund somewhere or a kitty of something that's for maintenance of something that we can pull from. There's gotta be some money somewhere to do this. Probably not 200 grand, but there's money for permits and those type of things.
Alan,
Yes, ma'am.
did you give us the name of the biologist? I didn't.
No, I haven't got it back
Okay.
yet.
All right.
He's gonna email Janice with the information. So I don't know if we, the way this agenda is set, do we have to take motion on what we want to do, or we just kind of give direction?
Just direction.
Okay. Well, does everybody agree that that would be a good goal?
Yes.
Let's try to get a stream alteration agreement going. We kind of already looked at the map showing the property owners, and I will take it upon myself, I guess, to look at what 000 means in the assessor's book.
Okay, well, I'll find that out. for
Zero,
you.
zero.
I'll find that out for you tomorrow.
Yeah, I think-
The 000?
Talk to Jim Rooney.
Yeah.
He can tell you.
Yeah, he's-
Appreciate you coming.
Also, so Caltrans does maintain the creek up there by Denny's, and so maybe we can get Caltrans to do the area around the bridge, which would save us some money, you know, and, Jackson City takes care of it, but he did say that the county is responsible too. That's what they think, they've never pushed it, they just take care of it. So we could hammer the county supervisors too, maybe.
They're not gonna do nothing.
Or I shouldn't say hammer, we could
So, you talked with the city of Jackson, do the property owners own into the creek, just like our situation?
And did you ask Brita? We didn't
Ask them that.
ask about
I'm
that.
sure they do.
I'm sure it's the same everywhere.
When we were at the FEMA meeting, I believe Matt, which is the city inspector,
Mhm.
I think he said that.
Pretty much everybody. Yeah, there's probably no
property
city.
owners own- Right, it's kind of the other way up there. It's mostly landowners own the creek.
Mhm.
And he says they clean it no matter what.
Well, in this case, I'm looking at, from the bridge up to the dairy hole, we'd probably have to get permission from the Phillips and permission from the roads to access their property to do the maintenance. I don't know if roads would be much of a roadblock.
Well, we signed a paper years ago where they could do it.
Is that what they did?
Yeah, they did it
That's
years
right.
ago when they used to go.
Do you still
in
have that
and clean it.
paper?
Huh?
Do you still have that paper or a copy of it?
I don't know if I do or not. I bet you Betty does, probably my wife, probably somewhere.
Yeah, if you could find it, that would be
She
real
probably
helpful.
does. Janice probably has it. Because I used to give it to everybody. They did that one, I was on the creek committee in '97. And that's the map that my wife gave it, shows you how much stuff they moved out of the creek, when the engineers showed how much. Because I don't know for certain, but I think there's some of your drain pipes of the city are actually covered up because the creek's so high. And they ain't seen them, so they don't know they're there.
Well, if you can find that letter by the next meeting or get it to
Okay,
Janice so
yeah.
she can email it to us.
Right.
I think back in the 80s when they cleaned the creek,
Yeah, it
they
was-
had letters.
They
for
sent
Well,
them to everybody on the
96 we
creek.
wrote one, 96. The
96.
flood of 96, 97,
Okay.
yeah, we had one.
Yeah, that seems like the way to do it. Might have to pass it through legal and make sure it's current and sufficient.
I have a question. Why don't we file for a permit
Mhm.
and let Fish and Wildlife tell us, maybe we can bypass the biologist and they'll just say, yes, you can go ahead and do that. It'll save some time. Maybe, we start the process and then in the meantime, maybe get some more answers. I just want to fast track. I'm really impatient.
According to,
Yeah.
what I found out, that Caltrans would do it.
How long ago?
The voice, but, they, like I say, they don't take it out, they tie
10,
it up.
15, 16?
But I didn't go get so far as to find out if they charge, but I
And then they
don't
quit
think
doing
they
it. Too
do.
much work,
I
yeah.
think the boys, that's part of their learning.
Oh, yeah.
So, I've got a number if you want me to call them again and find out.
It does cost.
Let all this building go up.
They-
They've never done
City of
anything about
Jackson
it. Well,
pays
it runs off
Pine
my
Grove.
house's roof.
200 and something.
There's a long-
So it does, but-
The
20
city's-
county
Started Mule Creek.
None of them ever trust
We'll sit
that.
down with, and it's gonna be, Lip Trap is the actual guy.
Janice probably
Lip trap?
knows the
Lip
last
trap.
time I got up.
You can ask Angelo about it again, but Lip
All
Trap
right.
is the guy that can actually pull crews from wherever. Again, that was
Lady's
their
name that was here,
responsibility
I
to
think,
clean the creek.
When the lady was
I
there.
believe if they do it, they just do it.
Yeah, but they'll need a stream
City
alteration
manager.
I
agreement.
don't think they do that.
The lady.
No, somebody's gonna need one.
Right, but
Our
they'll
city
take care of
manager,
it.
the
And
lady.
I think we should,
Used to do.
Here.
I think we should get a,
You should get the permit
Kim
anyhow.
Kerr.
we should, and we should
Kim Kerr,
develop
I
a
think.
relationship with them on a good level.
She was saying
Not to
that.
try to, go down and do it ourselves and get in trouble with them. We want a good professional relationship with them and go from there. They'll,
Yeah, Mule
We can
Creek
be
doesn't like, they wants to
persuasive.
help, so, just no one ever asked.
no.
That's what Heather said.
So I think
Angela said.
also, are
They
we
did a
in,
good job for years, Mule Creek did, cleaning it out.
are we in agreement that the property owners, we're not gonna try to charge them or they're not really, we can get permission from them, which I'm sure that won't be a problem. I don't see why it would if we're trying to clean things up or whatever, but.
My only question becomes if you have these property owners, say in the 80s and 90s, signing these agreements, and you have one guy that just puts his heels in the ground and says, I'm not signing it, what do? Go around his property?
Yeah.
Or you just go through the creek.
Yeah, just,
If you get a permit, you can just go down the creek and clean it, don't matter what anybody, well,
yeah, they're not, it's not.
if you don't hurt, up to the banks.
Yeah, that's true.
Almost
Unless you're
positive.
asking them for money, that's not gonna matter.
But we're not, yeah, I don't think we
Always
would,
gonna say no.
No.
But you never know.
Yeah.
Phillips is kind of.
but I don't think we would, because I think we were kind of led to believe that we'd be going and asking people, telling them they're responsible for the creek and to pay for the cleanup and all that. No.
No.
Okay.
It's kind of impossible for private.
So I think with the stream alteration agreement, I really think we should at least talk to a consultant. I have a couple in mind here locally, but I don't know the process of how we would pay for it.
That's why I'm saying if we just go straight to them
They'll tell you.
and
Maybe we could get
we
somebody
could bypass that
that wants to donate their
cost.
time.
Yeah.
I've got a biologist for you.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
For Fish and Wildlife?
Yep. Tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Her name's Sandra, Sandra, Jax.
Jax.
Her number is 916-358-2916.
358.
And just tell Sandy that I told you to call her.
Okay.
And she's awesome. Yeah, these biologists bounce around a lot, so I don't keep track of who they are, but Sandy's good.
Thanks so much, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, she's getting a call tomorrow. Yes.
Lisa, do you want to take charge and call the biologist and, well, maybe ask her opinion if we need to get a consultant or if, I'll be honest, I filled out stream alteration agreements before. They're not difficult, but I really don't want to be responsible.
Okay, I
for those
appreciate
one.
that.
Yeah.
And just get it going and then we
I'll
can
fill
find
it
it out.
out.
You look good, guys.
Still
There's
up?
three guys that can-
Did you?
three guys that work for-
Perfect.
Maybe, all right, I'll lean towards this. If you call the biologist and do the legwork and you get it to a point where you need help with the stream alteration agreement, we'll see what we can do.
Okay,
So
sounds good.
I don't know who owns the creek, but I mean, I'm just looking at my mapping
Mm-hmm.
app, and all the way down to basically Quail Court is one contiguous parcel that includes all the city streets and everything, and then up to Rhodes property up there,
Daryl.
the Dairyole, is all, there's no properties that come to the center of the creek until you get down there to Quail Court. So
Well,
you
without
should-
getting a definite answer, I would lean to say that's the city's responsibility.
Yeah, and when I highlight that piece, that particular parcel, it does not come up with an ownership, but it's all, like I said, it's all one contiguous with the
Zero,
city
zero.
streets and everything,
The
so.
city streets is connected to it.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for
I would take that as a clue, you know?
God.
Except this little parcel right by the bridge. Just
Yeah,
on the
that's
upstream-
Amateur Water Agencies.
Is that Amateur Water? Okay.
Yeah, it's,
That's part of washed away almost.
yeah, I don't think
It's not
they,
there no more.
yeah, half of it's not there anymore. That's their little pump station.
Was, yeah.
Yeah.
Goose pump. Because they don't water it for years.
It was to boost the pressure on the side.
Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah, they had a pump station.
You have a question?
No, we were going, we were jabbering.
Sorry.
No, but I thought you wanted to ask something.
He was asking about the pump station, where to pump.
Okay, so we kind of have a game plan for next meeting. And we're going to look into a stream alteration agreement. Maybe we'll have a draft of the stream
Said you could
alteration.
get it printed out for us.
Now, if we do that, we probably have to present it to the city council for approval before we submit the agreement.
Never in the past. That's not
Okay.
That's the street.
We have that authority as the committee?
Yes, you do.
We have the vice mayor here.
Okay. Well,
Sign anything.
Do what you want.
well then. All right, we'll get, maybe the next board meeting, or next meeting, some information back from the Fish and Wildlife biologist. And, we probably should look at the stream alteration agreement, at least as a committee, and approve it before we send it on, get more than one eye on it, I
That'll
think.
be another month.
We could just send it through email and have everyone approve it.
Since this is a very informal committee. You know,
The only time I
Yeah,
think
thank
you're
you.
gonna ever have to ask for anything is if there's a financial thing coming to it, but, so as city council, I'm gonna report on everything that you guys discuss, that's kind of what my job is. So if someone does Parks and Rec and whatever, and I do, which I do Parks and Rec too. So I basically tell them everything that your game plan is, just so they're all up to
They'll be
speed,
excited.
so.
So, Stacy, if this permit costs $250 for an application fee,
We
do
can
that.
just
We
do
can.
that, yeah.
before you guys have a,
I don't think we have to vote on it, I'm talking big money, a couple $100, so, believe.
Right. Right. City manager has up to 5,000.
Okay. all right. Well, I can work with you, and I guess we're steering away from getting the consultant's advice. We're just gonna go cut some trees down.
$609 for projects less than $5,000. There's a fee schedule on online.
So, I guess that would be something we need to know off the bat, is if we go use CAL FIRE or the prison, is what their charge is, because if it's under 5,000, that's based on the fee.
If we go through them, we don't have to do the agreement. They'll do that.
I don't know
No?
about
I'm not
that.
for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think
can
we're still gonna
find
have
out, but I'm
Okay.
pretty sure the city would have to do it.
Yeah. I'm kind of leaning towards that the city's responsible for that section, they're gonna be responsible for the permit.
Okay.
So maybe, now that we're talking this through, contacting Mule Creek and or CAL FIRE first, before we even fill out the permit, with the idea of, we're just wanting to clean some brush up, we don't want to disturb the bed at this time. I think my goal would be, just let's see what's there before we go muck out 8 feet of so-called gravel that Stacy says is there. That maybe is next year's goal. Let's just, and this process will let us, figure out who Sandra is, and Alan Gregory is,
There's,
resources.
I'm just reading through this, there's, what they're saying is a standard agreement. Any agreement other than an agreement for gravel, rock, or sand extraction, agreement for timber harvesting, and agreement for routine maintenance,
That's, I think,
master agreement or master agreement for timber operations so those can be for up to 5 years.
yeah.
And then there's potentially for longer than 5 years as well. So
That's the one thing we still have.
the options there.
Is that 5-year.
Well, hopefully this Sandra, she'll be helpful enough to guide us in
Yeah.
the right direction. And in the meantime, it sounded like you had some contacts at Mule Creek.
Yes.
Maybe,
I'll, as soon as I get a hold of Sandra, then I'm gonna get a hold of Angela.
wow, do you have a job?
I'm a barista.
All right, well, a motivated partner here.
Want a coffee?
Okay, let's go to item 4 so we can discuss that a little bit. It got brought up earlier about the history of the levee in the Sutter Creek. From what I know, it was a levee system that was built, I've heard, from the 1950s, early 60s. Why was it built? Who built it? Do we know any of that?
Army Corps is what I keep hearing, but I've never seen a document of it. I'm sure it exists.
Did the town flood?
Yes, 55.
55?
There was 2 feet of water, they said, running down the main street for 2 days.
And was that before the levees?
Before the levee.
Really? Wow.
That's what I heard, it was built after 55.
But even with the levies, and Carol and Strumple, she says they have to pay an extreme amount of money for insurance for the flooding down there.
We
Because
have
it's,
to have flood insurance.
I mean,
In the floodplain.
Floodplain, it's expensive.
What is the floodplain here?
You have to get they change it every year, it seems like. Army Corps engineer does that.
We
Oh, they do.
actually have maps that
Oh.
show who's in the flood zone and stuff.
Change
They're
it like
supposed to
every
be putting
5
that
years.
up on the wall too. I've got a whole bunch of maps they're supposed to be putting up, and that's one of them.
So
The floodplain.
so then there is contact at least once a year about, with them. So we could get
You know when they put those
Yeah.
out about every
We
5
can find
years?
out there
they
who-
do the floodplain.
who the person is.
But Army Corps engineer
Digging
does
in
that.
here was 25 years.
So we really don't know much history about the levees. Is
No.
But they just come.
I don't, unfortunately.
there an old file cabinet with a levy build of 59?
I wasn't here in '60.
I think some of
Yes,
them are, I really believe
Yeah,
some of them
Yeah,
are
and a letter.
Yeah.
Say, hey.
built, are built before that. Because my levee, if I dig into it, I find bottles that were made in like 1920, 1930 in the
That's
levee.
probably
wow.
the miners building levees back then.
Surprised Donnie Meekum didn't come dig all those up.
All right, so,
City dump.
We'll put this
um,
on next time and we'll try to get some more information.
well, I'm gonna offer that I call maybe Army Corps of Engineers to see what I can find. And I'll try to report back at the next meeting. I used to have some resources there, but I really don't like calling them because then I remind them who I am. So I haven't talked to you. It's like, in my job, when I go out to read meters and I see a farmer, he always tells me about the leak that I need to fix the next day, so I try to dodge him. I'm glad I found you out here. You know about that valve that you need to replace over there? Nope, you know. Okay, does anybody have anything else they would like to discuss about the history of the levees? All right,
Appreciate you coming.
any committee member reports? You,
We've kind of covered it.
yeah, we kind of, future items, I think we're gonna bring back the stream alteration agreement, or 1600, whatever you wanna call it. Any other future items that you would like on here? We're gonna talk maybe about the history of the levee, the Army Corps.
Maybe we can get a commitment from Caltrans, someone there to come and present, or at least some answers.
I'm kinda leaning towards staying out of their jurisdiction for what we're trying to do, and maybe keep them as a separate item. You know, not try to,
Don, maybe me and you will work on that as a separate item with your letter that you wrote.
Okay.
I'm gonna send the Caltrans about the whole painting thing.
Yeah.
I'll work with you on that. We just never,
Okay.
because
I just need to stick my photos to it.
aren't they only, they're gonna say we only have 50 feet on each side of the
This
bridge.
is just
or
about the
something.
paint. Yes, it has nothing to do with the creek. It has to do with the bridge.
Rick Johnson.
That's who I've been talking to.
We're way above Rick Johnson.
Okay, so do you wanna kinda keep that as an ongoing item, the paint of the bridge, painting of the bridge?
Yeah, just kind of a separate thing, but yeah, and I'll work with.
I'm hoping that we can get the community involved in it, like, even if it's to pick a color, because once you get people involved, then they're gonna get more pressure to take care of it, yeah. So that's what I wanna find out. Can we, is there
Stacy
a
wants
thing-
like rainbow.
Jalapeno
green.
I knew it.
There we go.
The big arrow pointing toward your factory. Oh, boy. Well, I have one future item, and I don't know how to go about this, if it has to, since we don't make motions. Can we change the time of our meetings to earlier?
We tried, and unfortunately, I tried to change it. And in the past, we've always changed council meeting times by resolution. But our city attorney says we have to do it by ordinance. And when we do an ordinance, it always changes 2 or 3 months because there's readings and.
Put in a request and then do, your next 3 meetings will be emergency creek meetings.
What time you want, like
And just
6?
change it.
I don't know, I just don't like 7 o'clock meetings.
No,
Yeah,
we don't either.
Yeah.
All our other meetings are at 6, starting.
Yeah, so why?
Yeah,
So why is the Parks and, is the Parks and Recs at 6?
Yes.
Then why would this one be any
Was it
different?
originally at 7,
Yes.
back in the 80s? or
Yes.
whatever? Oh, okay,
Back
that's
in
why.
the 90s.
Well,
when
city
all
council
the
member
meetings-
Rhodes, I'd like to put in a request to change the meetings and change the ordinance
Okay,
We'll find out.
to 5:45.
and you can have, just make your next.
So I'm calling it for an emergency
Move it up
meeting.
an hour. That's what I feel.
I don't mean no talking.
She'll ask the attorney, but I think I'm right. You can call it emergency.
Does everybody agree they'd rather have 6?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion.
We don't do motions apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, make a motion.
For our meetings to be at 6 o'clock.
I second. Third. Everybody in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
All right, see what we do.
Well, does anybody else have anything else for future reports or items? Or reports or items? I adjourn at 8:11.
I like what
I wish city council was this effective.
Maine and